Today is January 15th, 2024, Martin Luther King Day, where we celebrate the life of perhaps one of the most important people in American history. Just as important as the founding fathers, just as important as everyone in this country that has fought against intolerance and fought for civil rights in this country. And unfortunately, it's also the day where the right wing make their feelings known about the legacy of Martin Luther King by misquoting him or making up salacious lies about him. And of course, I'm talking about Nick Adams, who posted this photo this morning with a photo of Martin Luther King, one of his famous photos, superimposed with a Make America Great Again red hat, and the caption, Martin Luther King Jr. would have been part of the MAGA movement today, just like his niece, Aveda King. And of course, his comments had photos of the same thing, with him shaking hands with Donald Trump and sitting at a table having a chocolate milkshake with Donald Trump. That is disrespectful, to be sure. I mean, the fact is Donald Trump represents everything that Martin Luther King fought against when it comes to intolerance and injustice and unfairness in this country. But of course, people like Nick Adams and the other two people I showed you here show their true colors by either trying to misquote Reverend King are trying to show how he would be part of the MAGA movement. But it only gets worse. Donald Trump decided to post this on Truth Social. Unlike Martin Luther King, crooked Joe Biden, and deranged Jack Smith are persecuting me because I'm put America first. I marched with King and he didn't mind that I was white. I have a whole lot of black friends. First things first, Trump, you're a fucking liar. You didn't march with Martin Luther King. And if you believe the photos that are being posted all over Twitter and Truth Social of you standing with civil rights leaders, especially on the Edmondson-Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday, if anyone actually believes those photos, then they're just as brain dead and as stupid as you are. But let's talk about someone real quick who was there, who was on that bridge, who was injured. Let's talk about someone who actually put his money where his skull was, who did organize that march on Washington. And let's talk about where exactly the hell you were on that day. Let's talk about that person, shall we? Now, I know this day is reserved for Martin Luther King, but let's talk about the man you insulted the day you became president. And that man I speak of course, is former Representative of Georgia, John Lewis, civil rights icon in his own right. Let's start in 1960. John Lewis was 20 years old. Trump was just a little lump of thing of a 14-year-old. And what exactly was Donald Trump doing at the military academy at that time in 1960? He won himself a neatness award. What was John Lewis doing? He became one of the original 13 Freedom Riders, defying laws preventing blacks and whites from sitting next to each other on public transportation. Let's go 3 years later. Trump led his private school's white glove drill team in the Columbus Day Parade in New York City. But unfortunately, he was removed from that drill team, mind you. Well, from the drill team commander, because he hazarded young students. I don't know what that word hazard means in this context when it comes to Trump, but I can pretty much guess. Now, in 1963, that same year, at that same time, where was John Lewis? Oh, that's right. John Lewis helped organize the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom and spoke alongside Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Let's jump to 1965, shall we? Trump got his second deferment from the Vietnam War while he was at Fordham University. That same year in 1965? Oh, that's right, that little day that was in Selma, Alabama, something called Bloody Sunday. Maybe you've heard about that, where the man you actually identify with, the former governor of Alabama, George Wallace, ordered police officers and civilians to beat and then oftentimes murder African Americans on the Edmondson Pettus Bridge. So while you were trying to get your BS excuse from the Vietnam War, John Lewis and so many others, 600 people, marched across the Edmondson Pettus Bridge where they were tear gassed and beaten by troopers. In Lewis's case, his skull was fractured. Let's jump to 1973. Donald Trump's actions got him sued by the DOJ. He's managing his day's properties at that point and refused to rent to African Americans in violation of civil rights laws. Now, obviously, Trump he settled the lawsuit without any admission of wrongdoing, but we know he's a fucking scumbag. Now, what exactly was Lewis doing? He was running the voter education project, which pushed registered minority voters across the nation. Let's talk about the 80s, shall we? I mean, you say Donald Trump is a civil rights icon. So let's talk about the 80s. What did he do in the 80s? In 1981, he bought a 14-story building facing New York City's Central Park and began a campaign to drive out the rent-stabilizing tenants so he can begin gutting and renovating the building. According to Donald Trump, according to the lawsuits, Trump is the one who cut the heat and the water to the remaining tenants of that building. Civil rights, right? Man who could emulate someone like Martin Luther King. What did John Lewis do in 81? He was elected to the Atlanta City Council. 1987, Donald Trump got himself a bestseller, The Art of the Deal. He didn't even write it. He talked about it, and his ghostwriter, Tony Schwartz, now regrets the picture he painted of Trump in that book. What did John Lewis do in 1987? He was elected to Congress. So before you start trying to... Well, matter of fact, here's something. Donald Trump hasn't said anything about John Lewis. Actually, no, I'm mistaken about that. He has said about something in John Lewis. He said this on Twitter, quoting him, Congressman John Lewis should spend more time on fixing and helping his district, which is in a horrible state and falling apart, not to mention crime infested, unquote. See, here's the thing. John Lewis's district, if you know anything about it, has the largest airport, one of the largest universities in the country. And the only reason why Trump says it was crime infested is because it was heavily populated by blacks. So you're black, you're a criminal, basically, in his words. And here's the worst joke of all. When the National Smithsonian's African American Cultural Museum was opened, Donald Trump made this huge talk about attending the opening ceremony for it. Knowing that John Lewis was going to be part of that exhibit, of that museum, he canceled his trip. Trump doesn't care about civil rights. Trump doesn't care about Martin Luther King. And for those on the right wing, like Nick Adams and the others I told you here, thinking that he did, are just delusional. And quite frankly, it is fucking disgraceful and disgusting that they would post things like this. is a disgrace and an insult and a disgrace to everything Martin Luther King, John Lewis, and so many other better people than Donald Trump have sacrificed for in the cause of freedom in this country. Nick Adams, and if this sounds like a threat, I guess it is. I would like to debate you on the merits of posting something this fucking stupid. What exactly are you getting from this? Trampling on a civil rights icon. Just to prove your loyalty to Trump? If this is what needs to be done to prove your loyalty to a man like Trump, I'm glad I'm not loyal to Donald Trump. Because quite honestly, my soul is not up for sale. My black skin is not up for sale. Maybe yours is. And you, and those like you, are going to pay the price for this kind of insult one way or another. CTP, know the truth, God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.